Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. Today I have another video for you, and that is going to be 5 reasons why I love the Star Wars The High Republic series. I have done one other video like this before in this kind of 5 reasons series about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere books, and this one I'm going to talk about The High Republic. So for those who don't know, Star Wars The High Republic is a multimedia project that is currently being done for Star Wars, primarily in publishing of books and comics, although there's some other stuff going on as well. And it's one that I really enjoy. This series is special to me, especially in addition to the fact that I just enjoy the series. It's very special to me because it's kind of what got me back into reading a few years ago. I had read a few Star Wars books here and there, kind of in high school, but then I took some time off from that, just didn't make the time for reading even though I wanted to, and then The High Republic started, so I picked up Light of the Jedi, and then the rest is history, and now I'm here, talking to you all about books and stuff. So this series is very special to me because it kind of got me back into reading, in addition to the fact that it's a series that I really like. So we're going to get started with the 5 things that I like about it. Before I start that, I do just want to preface this by saying I am not completely caught up yet. I have read all of the young adult and adult novels of Phase 1, which is 6 books in total, and I have also read the first adult book and the first young adult book in Phase 2. However, I am not quite caught up on that, even up to the point where we are now. The other books have already been out for several months, but I have not gotten around to them yet. So this is going to be based off of the 8 High Republic books that I have read so far. So starting off here, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the characters of this series. The characters in this series I think are wonderful. There are many of them who are among my favorite characters in Star Wars books. Between Jedi, such as Elzar Mann, Reath Silas, Vernestra Rwoh, Stellan Gios, all kinds of other ones, even some of the characters in Phase 2, which I'm not going to touch on Phase 2 as much in this video just because I personally didn't find the 2 books in it that I have read quite as memorable as some of the stuff in Phase 1. That's really the stuff I really connected with, but I did enjoy the 2 books I've read in Phase 2 anyway. But you have a lot of good Jedi characters because this series takes place kind of in the height of the Jedi. You have some really excellent side characters as well, like Chancellor Lina Soh, as well as the Chancellors in Phase 2, which I have seen a little bit of, as well as several other side characters like the Vessel crew in Phase 1. And then you also have some excellent villains as well, with the Nihil, with the Nameless, which to me is one of the most absolutely awesome concepts ever to come out of Star Wars is the Nameless. I absolutely love it. You also have other villains like the Drengir, which are not super prevalent in the novels. As far as I'm aware, they have only appeared in one of the novels so far, which is quite unfortunate, but they are quite prevalent in the comics from what I've heard. But they're also very unique and interesting. So this has a very unique set of villains. Also in Phase 2, you have the Path of the Open Hand, which is another thing that I really like. So you have a really interesting set of characters, a really unique set of villains, and the characters I just really connect with. I think they are characters that are interesting, have interesting personalities. This is a time period, especially where the Jedi, where, you know, like I said, the Jedi are kind of at their height, but you're starting to see some of the issues with the Jedi Order kind of come through that are then very prevalent in the prequels. And you see that with some of the characters in this series. For example, my probably favorite example of this is Elzar Mann, who is kind of similar in many ways to a character like Anakin Skywalker, where, you know, he is a Jedi, he's generally, you know, tries to be a good person, but he definitely has some issues going on, and does some things in 1 or 2 of the books that are maybe a little bit unbecoming of a Jedi. You know, stuff like that. The characters I just really enjoy, and then again, great villains, super interesting villains, lots of interesting ideas with them. When it comes to villains in a lot of Star Wars projects, whether that be the movies or some of the TV shows have been going a little bit different than this lately. But some of the TV shows and a lot of the books is that a lot of the time you get, you know, one of a few different types of villains, or maybe 2 of them. You get Sith, you get the Separatists in the case of the Clone Wars, or you get the Empire / First Order when it comes to the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Or some variation of those. You know, you get some version of the Empire, you get some version of the Separatists, you get some version of the Sith. In this series, you get these space pirates called the Nihil, which are really interesting, who then have these creatures called the Nameless that are also very interesting, that, in my mind at least, kind of dip a little bit into like cosmic horror, which is something very up my alley, so I really enjoy that. So yeah, great character stuff, great character development, great interactions between characters, all that stuff. A lot of memorable characters, all that stuff. So many great characters. Second thing that I'm going to talk about is the rest of this is much more broadly stuff about this series. Because characters for me are like a very specific like thing within the actual books that I really like, whereas the rest of this is kind of more broadly looking at the series. So the first of those, the second thing I'm going to talk about, is the era itself. The High Republic is an era of Star Wars that takes place, I think, around 200 to 300 years before the movies. Technically, it takes place, I think, anywhere from like 80 years before the Phantom Menace until some few hundred years before that. But the books themselves take place, you know, in that 200 to 300-ish year period, I think, if my memory is correct. Which is an interesting period of time that has, as far as I'm aware, never been explored in Star Wars before. Even back in the days of the EU, which had tons of books, including several focused on the Old Republic era, the time period between the Darth Bane trilogy, which was around 1,000 years before the movies, and the Phantom Menace, there were very, very, very few books set in that period, and if there were any, it was usually set very close to Phantom Menace, so you never really got much of that in-between period. When the Sith were in hiding. And so that's one thing I really like about this era, is that it's exploring an entirely new time period. Like with a lot of other Star Wars books coming out nowadays, and even shows and movies, you're seeing kind of alternate takes on different time periods, you know, with something like the sequel trilogy. That, to me, even though some people say like the Thrawn trilogy is the sequel trilogy of Legends, I look at it more as New Jedi Order is the sequel trilogy, because it's kind of in that similar time frame. So, you know, it's exploring kind of an alternate version of that time period, or, you know, all kinds of other things like that. Whereas with High Republic, it's something completely new, completely unexplored, and completely original, basically, which is something that I really enjoy. And I also really enjoy about the era, like I said, is the Jedi Order in their prime. Which is something that is really interesting to see, really exciting to see. But then something else kind of related to that plays into this era is, you know, the Jedi Order are at their prime, they're really doing well. But then there's this threat of the Nihil and the Nameless and the Drengir and all these other groups that come in, and one of the things about this era that I really like is focusing on what scares the Jedi and what the Jedi fear. And so you get to see the Jedi Order at their height, but then also them at their height struggling with these situations, which I think is really interesting. But you not only also get the Jedi Order at their height, but you also get the Republic at their height. Very united, very, you know, everybody's kind of working together. Everybody is unified within the Republic. Obviously, probably not everybody, but it is much more unified than it is in, say, the prequel era, for example. And you get that tested in these books because of the things that happen. And just the time period and the way that it's presented and everything, I think is super cool. Third thing I'm going to talk about that I really enjoy about the High Republic is its unique tone, which is admittedly a bit less of a concrete thing for me to talk about, but it's something that I do appreciate about the High Republic that kind of bounces off of some of the stuff that I said about the era itself. The High Republic, you know, I'm going to go kind of in release order here. In Light of the Jedi has a very uplifting, very, you know, positive tone to it. Obviously, there is some bad stuff happening in Light of the Jedi, but it has this feeling of being uplifting, of, you know, the Jedi and the Republic are able to work together to conquer this threat of the Nihil and all this stuff that's happening. It has that just general lighter feel to it, even though there is some heavy stuff happening. It just has that feel. And then you hit the other books like The Rising Storm and The Fallen Star, which really conflict with that. And has that, especially in The Rising Storm, because in The Rising Storm, there's this celebration of the Republic that's happening, which is supposed to be very uplifting, very happy, very, we are all the Republic is kind of the big saying of this. And it's that basically is all of the Republic coming together to be like, we are all the Republic, we're all hanging in this thing together. And that is challenged, which is very interesting to see this very optimistic, very, I guess that's the best word I can think of, this very optimistic view of the Republic and the Jedi being severely tested, and the extreme darkness that can come out of that, going from this very high point to a very low point. Which I think is super interesting. And not only that, but you also, again, with the Nameless, have these kind of horror elements coming through, especially in the book The Fallen Star, I think. Again, where one of the things that the High Republic authors wanted to focus on was, what do the Jedi fear? And I think that is super interesting. That's something that I haven't seen explored too much in Star Wars. So to get something like this that does explore that in some depth is super interesting to me. And so, yeah, I just love the tone of the High Republic as well, where it has that very optimistic, very uplifting side to it, but then also this crushing darkness that makes you cry. So that is the third thing that I talked about. The fourth thing I'm going to talk about is just the general structure of the High Republic, which is something that I enjoy. It is a multimedia project. It is being written by several different authors, and these are both things, aspects of the structure of the High Republic that I really like. I think there are some things that could have been handled better when it comes to the structure. For example, again, in Phase 1, which is mainly what I'm talking about here, although Phase 2 definitely has its connections to these points that I'm also talking about. But to use Phase 1 as an example, you have certain plot lines coming in and out of the books. A plot line that is prevalent in the adult books might get picked up in the young adult books or in the comics or something like that. So in terms of the structure, it took some time to find their footing for sure. From what I've heard, it's a little better in Phase 2, though again, of course, I can't speak too heavily on that. But I do really enjoy the general structure of the series of bringing in a whole bunch of different authors who have unique voices, unique ideas, and having them all contribute to this really big interconnected story, which is another aspect of this that I really like, is it being a big multimedia project that even though it has all these different things going on with all these different characters, that if you're not consuming all of the stories might make you miss out on some stuff. Like, again, I'm only reading the adult and young adult novels, so I'm sure there are some things that I'm not picking up on. It makes it really interesting to see like all of these different mediums being used and all contributing to this one larger narrative. And even going beyond publishing as well, you have stuff like the Young Jedi Adventures series, which is a young children's series that I haven't seen, but I would like to check out sometime, maybe watch with my son or something. And so you have that going on. You have The Acolyte, which is going to be coming out, as long as nothing happens, next year probably, which explores the later days of the High Republic era. So you're getting even outside of the publishing realm with these things. You have Star Wars Eclipse, which is a video game that we don't know very much about, but is supposed to be set in the High Republic era. So you have all these different things contributing to this project, and I think that's really cool. Getting a lot of different creatives involved in it that all have unique ideas, unique perspectives, and that is something that can be difficult to really make work for sure, and I think there have been some struggles with that in the High Republic between all of the different authors trying to get everything to work out, but it's something that I can really appreciate the scale and scope and ambition of this project. Now, the final thing that I want to talk about, the final positive, the final thing that I love about the High Republic that I want to discuss is, for me, even though I enjoy a lot of the new canon stuff, I am a big fan of Star Wars Legends as well. And so one thing that I really appreciate about the High Republic is that it captures the feel of the old Legends stories very, very well. I have said several times in the past, in places on the internet, if you are a fan of the old expanded universe stories and you haven't really given much of the canon stuff a chance, or, you know, maybe you weren't really into the sequel trilogy or aren't into the shows or whatever it may be, and you're just not really sure if it's for you, give the High Republic a try, because it is by far the closest thing to feeling like the old Legends stories that I have come across so far. For a lot of the reasons that I've already discussed as well. It is a big multimedia project. It is a really ambitious and large series encompassing many books with lots of characters. It explores a unique era, much like several other Legends books did, like the Old Republic books or the New Jedi Order or even the Legacy era. And just explores a lot of stuff that Legends also did, in addition to just feeling like something that could also have fit into Legends, potentially. And that's something that I really appreciate about it, is bringing that side of things back. One thing that I had kind of been hoping for when it came to some of the current Star Wars stuff is getting some of those old Legends feelings back. Not necessarily bringing back actual stories and characters, even though I'm perfectly fine with them doing that as well. But just having that, you know, big expansive series like things like the New Jedi Order or Legacy of the Force, or things like that, which are these big series that encompass large periods of time, exploring interesting and unique ideas and all that stuff. And I think the High Republic really nails a lot of the things that I loved about Legends, and a lot of things that I think other people really loved about Legends. So again, if you are a fan of those old stories and you have not really given the High Republic a try, definitely do so, because I think, you know, there's still a chance you may not like it, because obviously it's not going to be for everyone. But I think if you are looking for something with that similar feel to those old stories, you could not pick something better out of the current canon than the High Republic. I would highly recommend checking it out if you are an old Legends fan. So that pretty much wraps up everything I have to talk about in this video, the 5 things that I love about the High Republic, among several others, of course, but these are, I think, the 5 most prevalent things that I really enjoy about this series. So let me know down in the comments what you think of the High Republic. What are some of your favorite things about it? Do you have some different things that you really enjoy about it, or do you share some of my opinions, or anything like that? Are you excited for Phase 3? I know I am, even though, again, I'm not caught up. Phase 3 is getting back to the characters from Phase 1, because if you don't know, Phase 2 was a prequel, and so Phase 3 is directly following up Phase 1, and I cannot wait to get back to some of those old characters that I love so much, and the old plot lines and everything, and see where things are going to pick up. I think it's going to be really, really awesome. So that is pretty much it for this video, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.